Hello there, my dear wanderer. Welcome to my humble campfire. I am Ophelia, your guide through the unknown. Tonight, we will read two real stories of possession that blur the line between reality and nightmare. But beware, once you step into this world, there's no turning back. If you enjoy our midnight stories, don't forget to like and subscribe to join our coven of curious wanderers. Now, let us begin. My name is Alex, and I'm a senior at my high school. This story takes place during last year's spring semester, right after our winter break. Our literature teacher, who I'll call Miss Claire, had always been a bit eccentric. But after the break, she came back completely different. She started giving some peculiar lessons. After winter break, Miss Claire introduced us to a new cultural studies segment, focusing on ancient rituals and mythologies. Initially, it seemed interesting. She spoke passionately about ancient civilizations and their rituals, talking about how that wisdom could be useful in today's world. However, her enthusiasm quickly escalated into something more unsettling. She began bringing in strange objects to class, old, worn-out books, peculiar artifacts, and even a small cauldron one day to make what she called sacred tea. We laughed it off at first. She's just quirky, we'd say, but the atmosphere in her classroom grew darker with each lesson. Miss Claire started to act more erratically. She kept her discourse that we should learn these things in order to be more versatile and respectful members of society. She would sometimes read texts in a language none of us could understand, her eyes wide and almost frenzied. She'd lock the doors during her lessons and pull down the blinds, insisting it helped us immerse ourselves in the experience. One day, she brought in a large, ancient-looking book with a heavy lock on it. She called it the Grimoire of Forgotten Truths and said it held the secrets of how reality works. Her voice took on a strange, almost reverent tone when she spoke about it. We were supposed to be discussing The Great Gatsby, but instead, she made us copy symbols from the book, claiming it was a form of ancient meditation. The turning point came during one of her meditation sessions. The room was dark, lit only by a few candles. Yes, she got to this point. She had us sit in a circle, and she began chanting in that foreign language again. Suddenly, she stopped. Her eyes rolled back, and she started convulsing. We all panicked, but no one dared to move for a while, each looking to the other's face, looking for a clue. After a few moments that felt like an eternity, she collapsed, breathing heavily. When she opened her eyes, they were different, darker, almost hollow. She smiled and started talking to us in a completely different manner. Really felt it wasn't her, but rather someone else using her body. It looked very confident, as if it owned the place, and all of us as well. To me, it felt like something evil. It was terrifying. I remember looking at my friend Jenny and seeing the fear mirrored in her eyes. We both knew we had to get out. Now I remember these next words clearly, since it was the scariest thing I've ever witnessed in my life. Miss Claire, or whatever was moving her mouth back then, said,
"We are very proud of your progress, young ones. You have a bright future ahead."
After that, she started telling a story about an ancient hero or something, but I didn't pay attention. All I could focus on was the thought of getting out of there. The next day, feeling things had escalated too much, Jenny and I decided to report what happened to the principal. We were scared, but we knew it was the right thing to do. However, when we got to the principal's office, Miss Claire was already there, looking completely normal. She just looked at us as we were standing at the entrance and gave us a creeping smile. There was no need for any other sign for us to give up the idea, because I knew things weren't as normal as it seemed. Not at all. When we saw that smile, we froze. Trying to hide the fear, we greeted Miss Claire and changed direction. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her chanting in my head. The next day, Jenny didn't show up at school. Later, I found out she had transferred to another school. She wouldn't say why, but I knew it had to be because of what happened. Miss Claire continued her strange lessons until the end of the semester. I never went back to her class. Instead, I managed to switch to another teacher, citing personal reasons. I heard that she finally left the school after summer break, and no one knew where she went. Sometimes I still have nightmares about those dark, candlelit sessions and her hollow eyes. I don't know what happened to Miss Claire or what those rituals were truly about, but I know one thing. I never want to get close to those rituals again. Hello, my name is Yami, and I'm the video maker of this channel. The story I'm about to tell happened to me some years ago, in 2016. Back then, I was really into studying magic and esotericism. I also used to meditate very often, and because of this, I was used to weird feelings and sensations. I was hanging out with a girl called Isabella, and we decided to spend a night camping on a very quiet beach near our town. We invited 3 other friends who were always with us. We had a blast that night. We drank, played acoustic guitar, chatted and played some games. That was one of the most fun days of my life. But something very strange also happened on that occasion. One point I hadn't mentioned yet is that Isabella had lost a friend by that week. He had decided to leave this life, and she had told me that she had been dreaming about him very often. She always said she had a connection to spirits, but when that happened to her friend, she was experiencing it on a new level. When we were at the beach, Isabella started to feel sick while everybody was still very energetic and happy. I took her to the tent to see if she needed some care, but she told me she was just tired, and indeed she seemed tired. Her voice was very slow, and she basically threw herself on the floor as soon as we entered the tent. We talked a little bit, and then she fell asleep. And right when I thought about leaving and going back to the party, she held my hand and started talking.
Hey.
But it wasn't her anymore. I say that because the presence was completely different. As I mentioned before, I was studying magic, and I was very sensitive to subtle things. And the moment she held my hand, I simply knew it wasn't Isabella. I instinctively got on my guard. I didn't understand what was happening. I thought she could be sleep-talking, but I just kept a serious, centered expression and talked back to her. She said she was actually her friend. I don't remember his name. He then asked me to tell Isabella that he was in a very bad place and to ask her to not let him go. I said I wouldn't make promises to the dead, and he didn't seem to like it. But there was nothing he could do about it because at that time I was very well protected. Isabella went back to sleep and woke up an hour later feeling totally refreshed. I asked her if she remembered our talk in the tent, but she could only recall being very tired and falling asleep. I never told her what happened. Days went by, and Isabella seemed to have solved her insomnia. But I, on the other hand, started having a harder time trying to sleep. 2 or 3 days after I felt a presence in a corner of my room. I used to meditate before going to sleep, and as I meditated, I could feel the presence more clearly. I finally asked mentally, "Who is there?" But I kinda knew. When I was engaged in this kind of communication, the responses would somehow pop up in my head, but not as ordinary thoughts. Isabella's friend confirmed his identity. I kept my guard up, avoiding fear or hatred. But truth is, I was starting to feel worn out. It's really tiring to have a ghost in your room, if you ask me. On the next day, I can't recall what happened, but it was a very tiring day. I remember laying in bed, completely destroyed and feeling like crying. But again, that presence manifested itself. It seemed very oppressive this time, and I started to fear that I was being pulled to that bad place he referred back to on the beach. When I looked to the corner where he used to stay, I felt so much pressure and despair and fear. I called a friend of mine who was a witch. She instructed me. I repeated a prayer with her, drew a circle and put candles around it. From inside the circle, feeling empowered by the rituals and completely confident, I told the spirit to go away for good.
Go away!
And so he did. I spent the following day practically the whole time in bed, resting. I never felt his presence again. In fact, I never had any contact with the supernatural as clear as this. I guess I shut myself to such events, probably because of this one. To this day, I feel so lazy just thinking about dealing with this kind of thing. I don't know if you believe me or not, but I truly believe in communication with the dead and other strange entities that float about in our reality, and I admire those who work with them.